Hi, my name's Emery. 3 months ago, my husband told me, "Don't call me this week. I'm busy with a business partner." He smiled when he said it, like I should have known better than to ask questions. And maybe I did, because that same week, I found out his business partner was sharing a hotel room with him. But instead of calling, I stayed quiet. I watched. I learned. And one Sunday evening, while his whole family gathered around the dinner table, I pressed play. His smartwatch went live on their TV. And in that moment, every lie, every whisper, every dismissal unraveled. They told me to be silent, so I made the silence louder than any of them could bear. Now tell me, would you have done the same? It started on a Tuesday that looked like any other, quiet, steady, familiar. The late afternoon light stretched across the kitchen tiles, warm and harmless. I was standing by the counter, stirring a pot of soup while the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Charlotte in April has that strange kind of brightness, where even calm days feel slightly fragile, like something could snap beneath the sunshine. I checked the clock, 5:43 p.m., and reached for my phone. Our anniversary was only a few days away. 7 years married, 10 years together. I scrolled through old photos for a second, Lyle's arm around me at the lake house, that stupid grin he used to give whenever I caught him looking at me. I smiled without thinking, and then, like muscle memory, I typed him a message. "Thinking maybe dinner Saturday? I made a reservation at that Italian place you love." The 3 dots blinked for a moment, then disappeared. A minute later, his reply came. "Don't call me this week. I'm working closely with a business partner. No distractions." That was it. No emoji. No love you. Not even a period at the end. I read it again and again until the words lost shape. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, trying to form something casual. Got it. Or okay, be safe. But the backspace key swallowed each attempt. Eventually, I locked the screen and set the phone face down on the counter like it had burned me. The soup started to bubble over, but I didn't move. I just stared at the faint reflection in the microwave door, my own face looking back, unsure whether to laugh or cry. He'd been distant for months, but that message felt different. It wasn't work talking. It was dismissal. When I finally turned off the stove, the kitchen had gone dark except for the low golden light bleeding through the blinds. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the window. The street outside looked exactly the same. Our quiet neighborhood, the kids next door tossing a football. No one could have guessed that a marriage was quietly breaking in the house with the blue mailbox. By the time the clock hit 9, I'd changed into pajamas and crawled into bed. His side was untouched, the pillow still fluffed the way I'd left it that morning. I turned on the bedside lamp and opened a book, pretending to read, but the words blurred. My eyes kept darting toward the empty side of the mattress. I could almost hear his voice, low and smooth. "You know I'm doing all this for us, right?" Except now, us felt like a lie. I closed the book, reached for my phone again, and scrolled through our old messages, anniversaries, little miss you notes from business trips. He used to send me photos of sunsets from hotel balconies, little hearts drawn in coffee foam. Now, there was just that one message. "Don't call me." I don't know why I opened my email app. Habit, maybe. I always manage the household finances, the travel bookings, the bills. My thumb moved through the inbox automatically, scanning receipts, confirmations, the usual clutter. And then one subject line froze me. "Thank you for your reservation at the Grand Aspen Resort, Asheville." The sender, a generic hotel system. The booking name, Lyle Monroe. Dates, April 21st to 23rd. 2 guests. Honeymoon suite upgrade. Champagne package included. Our wedding anniversary weekend. The Grand Aspen was the same place we'd married, on the terrace overlooking the mountains, where we'd promised forever. I could still see the soft strings of light above us, hear the laughter, the toasts. My mother had said that day, "You'll always remember this view, honey. It'll remind you what you built together." Now it reminded me what he was destroying. I clicked through the confirmation, my pulse thudding with each line. Guest note, special occasion. Payment method, our joint card. My name listed as the billing contact. My hand started to tremble, but my thoughts stayed cold. Of course he would pick that place. Familiar, discreet, nostalgic enough to hide his guilt behind business. It wasn't stupidity, It was arrogance. He assumed I'd never check. I set the phone down carefully, afraid I'd throw it if I didn't. The silence in the room grew thick, pressing against my ears. I pulled the blanket over my knees and stared at the framed wedding photo on the dresser. We were standing exactly where that reservation said he'd be this weekend. I remembered how he used to touch my hand under the table, how he'd whisper things like, "You're my calm in every storm." I thought about how I believed him then. I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying the text. No distractions. Since when did I become a distraction? I got up, walked to the bathroom, splashed water on my face. The woman in the mirror looked familiar but heavier, eyes swollen, shoulders slightly bent. I whispered, "You knew, didn't you?" Maybe I did. Maybe every late-night meeting and sudden trip had been telling me something I didn't want to hear. The digital clock blinked 1:14 a.m. I wandered into the hallway and opened the drawer of the small desk by the stairs. Inside, I kept old cards and mementos, things that used to matter. The first card I pulled out was from our first anniversary. "To the most patient woman alive, thank you for putting up with me." The next one said, "You're my calm in every storm." I ran my fingers across the handwriting, smooth and deliberate. He'd always been good with words. It was the truth he wasn't good at. I sat there for a moment, the house quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. I could smell the faint trace of his cologne from the closet, a scent that used to mean home. Now it just meant absence. I thought about calling him, about asking the question outright. Who is she? But the thought of hearing his voice spin another lie made my stomach turn. Instead, I reached for the card again. I tore it in half, then into quarters, slow and deliberate. Each rip sounded louder than the last. For a brief second, it felt good. I picked up the pieces and dropped them into the trash bin beside the desk. My fingers lingered on the edge, trembling slightly, then steadied. I walked back to the bedroom, turned off the lamp, and crawled into the cold sheets. The moonlight stretched across the room, pale and unforgiving. I whispered to the darkness, "This time I'll be the storm." And for the first time in months, I actually meant it. The next morning, sunlight crept through the kitchen blinds, thin and sharp, cutting across the countertop where my phone buzzed quietly. I had barely slept, drifting between restless dreams and the same thought looping over and over. He booked the same resort on our anniversary for someone else. My throat felt dry, and my hands shook as I poured coffee into a mug. The smell was comforting, but it didn't reach me. I stared at the phone for a long time before picking it up. My thumb hovered over the call button under Odell. My mother-in-law. She had always made it clear that keeping up appearances mattered more than comfort, but she'd also told me she considered me like a daughter. I wanted to believe that still meant something. Maybe I thought she'd listen. Maybe she'd help me understand what was happening. When she answered, her tone was bright, rehearsed, Southern charm polished like silverware. "Emery, sweetheart, how are you? It's early, isn't it?" I took a breath, steady but cautious. "Morning, Odell. I'm sorry to bother you. I just needed someone to talk to." "Of course, dear. Is everything all right?" I hesitated. "I found a booking for Asheville. The Grand Aspen. It's our anniversary weekend, but Lyle didn't mention it. He said he was busy with work, with a partner. I'm trying not to assume the worst, but—" She cut me off, her voice gentle but cool. "Now, Emery, men in power are like that. They get consumed by work. The higher they climb, the less they can afford distractions." "Distractions," I repeated softly, the word catching in my throat. "Yes, dear. You don't want to ruin his momentum over emotions, do you? I know how it feels, trust me. But when a man's focused on success, it's best to let him be. He'll come home when things settle." I blinked, gripping the counter for balance. "You think I should just smile and act like everything's fine?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. Be elegant, Emery. Don't stir things up. These things blow over if you don't feed them." She meant well, or maybe she didn't. I couldn't tell anymore. The words landed like a slap, polite but bruising. I thanked her anyway. "I appreciate your advice," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "Good girl," she replied, like I was someone's obedient pet. "You'll see. It'll all work out." I hung up before she could say more. My reflection in the stainless steel toaster stared back, eyes dull, lips trembling slightly. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught somewhere deep in my chest. Instead, I whispered to the empty kitchen. Good girls don't get hurt, Odell. They get erased. The day passed in fragments. I cleaned things that weren't dirty, answered emails that didn't matter, and watched the clock slide toward evening. Around 4, a message popped up from Verraine, Lyle's sister. You're coming tonight, right? Fundraiser starts at 7. Dress nice. It's for the hospital project. Mom says you'll represent the family. Represent the family. After being told to stay quiet, now I had to smile in public. I typed a short reply, of course. By 6, I was standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the dark blue dress Lyle once said made me look composed. My hands smoothed the fabric automatically, though my chest felt tight. I added small gold earrings, something understated. I didn't want to shine. I just wanted to survive the night without breaking. The event was held at a country club on the edge of town, one of those places with chandeliers that sparkled too much and people who smiled too wide. The parking lot buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses as I stepped out of the car. Inside, I spotted Lyle across the room, surrounded by board members, his arm brushing against a woman's as they spoke. She was tall, stylish, the kind of polished confidence you see in business magazines. My stomach twisted. When he noticed me, his expression didn't soften. He smiled, polite and distant. You made it, he said when I reached him. Didn't think you'd want to bother with this one. I was invited, I replied, my voice level. Your mother insisted. He nodded, already looking past me. Good, good. Just try not to make a scene, all right? The press is here. The words were quiet, but sharp enough to cut. I stepped back, pretending to admire the flower arrangements, trying to steady my breathing. The chatter around me felt too loud. Half an hour later, while standing near the buffet, one of Lyle's colleagues, round face, shiny watch, expensive cologne, approached with a drink in hand. So you're the lovely Mrs. Monroe, he said, smiling as if he were paying me a compliment. You must be the stay-at-home credit card swiper, huh? The words hit like a shove. For a moment, I thought I misheard. Then he laughed, lightly, waiting for me to find it funny too. No one around us reacted. The people closest turned away, pretending not to hear. Lyle stood just a few feet away, staring at his drink. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't defend me. I smiled, small, sharp, precise. No, I said. I'm the one who makes sure the bills you sign actually get paid. He blinked, awkward laughter tumbling out. Didn't mean anything by it, Mrs. Monroe. Just teasing. Of course, I said, walking away before he could finish. My pulse thudded in my ears as I pushed through the crowd toward the exit. Behind me, laughter picked up again, as if nothing had happened. Outside, the cool air wrapped around me. I walked to my car, heels clicking against the pavement, the sound too loud in the quiet night. When I reached the door, my hand shook so hard I dropped the keys. I leaned against the car and took a deep breath. In the distance, I could still hear faint music from the event hall, the song they played at our wedding reception. The irony almost made me laugh. I started the car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned pale. Every muscle in my body ached from holding itself together. On the drive home, the city lights blurred past like streaks of memory. I could see us, years ago, driving the same route, laughing about how fancy people seemed in places like that. Lyle had once promised, "You'll never be invisible with me." The words replayed in my head like a broken record. I whispered back into the darkness, "You lied." By the time I reached the house, the tension had shifted into something else. Not sadness, not even anger, just clarity. I kicked off my shoes by the door, walked into the living room, and sat down on the couch. The clock ticked steadily, each sound heavier than the last. I thought about Odell's voice that morning. Be elegant, don't stir things up. About that man's smug laugh. About Lyle's eyes, deliberately averted. I reached for my phone to turn it off, but before I could, a notification popped up. A shared calendar alert. The title glowed in neat black letters, Strategic Partnership Weekend, Asheville. The same dates as the hotel booking. For a long minute, I just stared at it, feeling my pulse slow instead of quicken. Something inside me had shifted. Fear had left. So had hope. What remained was focus. I whispered to the empty room. Strategic. Huh? Let's play chess then. Morning light found its way through the curtains, soft but intrusive, painting faint stripes across the hardwood floor. I sat at the kitchen table, the same mug from last night, still half full, the coffee cold now. The calendar alert from Lyle's phone replayed in my mind. Strategic partnership weekend. The words had burned a path into my thoughts all night. Chess, I had told myself. If this was a game, then it was time I stopped pretending I didn't know the rules. By early afternoon, I was on my second cup of coffee, staring blankly at the backyard through the sliding glass door. I could hear the neighbor mowing his lawn, the buzz filling the space like static. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Naira, my oldest friend, the one who never called just to gossip. Her message popped up like a whisper from fate. Girl, is this Lyle's partner? Check her story. Just check. My stomach twisted. Naira knew things. Always had. She wasn't dramatic, but she also didn't sugarcoat. My hand trembled slightly as I tapped the link she sent. The app opened to a story. The profile name belonged to Melis Consulting. I recognized it immediately. Lal had mentioned her weeks ago. Brilliant strategist, he'd said. A great asset to the team. The story played in silence first. A hotel balcony, mountains in the background, sunlight turning everything gold. Then came the caption. Sunset, strategy, seduction. There she was, Melis, wearing a red silk robe, a wine glass in hand. Her hair loose, her laugh soft and confident. And then, just for a second, the reflection in the balcony door caught him. Lyle, standing behind her. I didn't gasp or cry. I just stared. The image flickered off after 15 seconds, replaced by the next post. 2 wine glasses, half empty, clinking together in a slow-motion loop. The caption read, "To new partnerships." My thumb hovered over the screen. It wasn't even subtle. It wasn't a mistake. It was a statement. The clock on the stove blinked 2:11 p.m. The air in the room felt heavy, too still. My mind began to move faster than my pulse. I exited the app, opened another one, our shared financial manager. Old habits die hard. I'd been the one who kept the bills organized, the taxes paid, the receipts archived. The login page loaded, and within moments, numbers filled the screen. Lines of transactions, some small, some large, all time-stamped during his business trips. There it was, the Grand Aspen Resort, $1,832.94. Then another, the Birch House, dinner for two, $216. Spa charge, couple's massage package. Every record was right there, precise, confident, documented. There was even a note under the dinner charge, anniversary weekend upgrade. The irony was too cruel to process. My name sat in the billing section. He'd used our joint account. I should have felt anger, but instead came something colder. Awareness. Patterns. Timelines. Data. Lyle wasn't just careless. He was predictable. My fingers moved on instinct. I opened my email, searched receipts, matched dates, and cross-referenced calendar alerts. He'd done this before. Smaller weekends labeled client meetups. But the spending patterns matched. It wasn't just this trip. It was a system. The longer I looked, the clearer it became. Every lie left a breadcrumb, and he had no idea I'd kept track of every crumb. My phone vibrated again, Naira calling this time. I answered, trying to steady my tone. I saw it, I said. On the other end, she sighed. I didn't want to believe it, Em. I almost didn't send it. But you needed to know. I know, I said quietly. You did the right thing. There was a pause. What are you going to do? I looked down at the open laptop, the numbers glowing back like evidence in a courtroom. I'm not sure yet, but I'm not pretending anymore. Good, she said, voice fierce but gentle. Don't let him make you feel small. When we hung up, I sat back in the chair, letting the quiet fill the room again. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. The ordinary world kept moving while mine quietly reshaped itself. I reached for my notebook, the one where I used to jot grocery lists and small reminders, and flipped to a blank page. In neat, deliberate handwriting I wrote, Strategic Assets, Lyle, Phase 1. Then beneath it, Financial Documentation, Image Evidence, Witness References. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning truth. There's a difference. By late afternoon, the sky outside began to dim. Shadows stretched across the kitchen floor as the sun slipped lower. I gathered everything, the receipts, the screenshots, the story video, and began saving them to an external drive. My fingers worked with calm precision. Every click was a quiet declaration. You wanted no distractions, Lyle. Well, here's focus. Hours passed that way. The house settled into evening, the walls echoing the soft hum of the dishwasher. I moved from the kitchen to the small study by the stairs, setting up folders on my laptop. I labeled one images, another financials, another personal statements. The rhythm of organizing steadied my breathing. Every photo of Maylise, every transaction, every line of deceit, I stored it all neatly. Not because I needed proof for myself, but because I knew how stories like mine got twisted. Women like me always ended up being told, "You're imagining things," or "You misunderstood." This time, there'd be no misunderstanding. At one point, I paused and looked around the room. On the shelf sat a framed photo of Lyle and me on our honeymoon, his arm draped around me, his smile confident. I studied it for a long time before turning the frame face down. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity. When I finished organizing, I made a cup of tea and sat by the window. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. I took a sip and let the bitterness coat my tongue. For the first time in months, my thoughts didn't feel scattered. I had direction. The woman in the reflection of the glass wasn't fragile. She was calculating. I whispered to the quiet, "If you think I'm the fool, let me show you what that looks like in court." The sentence lingered in the air, strong and strange, like I was hearing someone else's voice come out of me, someone smarter, sharper, less afraid. Before heading to bed, I went back to the laptop one more time. The folders were all aligned perfectly on the screen. I created one last directory and titled it simply, Phase 1 Documentation. Inside it, I added a single text file. The cursor blinked, waiting. I typed, "Partnerships end when one person starts lying about the terms." Then, in the same calm rhythm, I whisper the words that would carry me into whatever came next. "You're not the only one good at partnerships, love." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, watching the ceiling fan spin slowly above me. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. By the time the sun came up, I was already dressed. I made a cup of coffee and walked out onto the back porch, wrapping my robe tighter around me. The morning air was crisp, the kind that tried to convince you the world hadn't changed overnight. But it had. I sat down at the patio table and opened the group chat Lal's family used for everything. Birthdays, holidays, fundraisers. It had been silent on my end for days. I hadn't said a word, but they sure had. Photo after photo began to load. A private dinner at a vineyard just outside town. Vervain in a champagne-colored dress. Odell smiling like she was posing for a magazine cover. While standing close to Maylise, closer than necessary, closer than appropriate. She was seated next to him at the table. My seat, the one I always took at family events. They all looked so at ease. Comfortable, content, like I had never existed. My name wasn't mentioned in the captions. No, wish you were here. No, Emery couldn't make it. Just radio silence. It hit differently than the lies. The silence was louder. It said, "You're no longer needed. No longer part of this." I stared at the image for a long time. I knew that vineyard. Knew the table they'd chosen, the view they'd be facing. I'd booked it 2 years ago for Odell's birthday. The email confirmation was probably still buried in my inbox. Now, my place had been taken, and no one seemed to notice. Or worse, they did and simply didn't care. Later that week, I had a reason, an excuse really, to drive over to the Monroe estate. I told myself I needed to pick up a scarf I'd left behind after the fundraiser, though I knew exactly where it was, folded neatly in the bottom drawer of my own closet. I parked at the edge of the circular driveway, just far enough to avoid being seen from the front windows. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Closure? Proof? Maybe I just needed to confirm what my gut had already accepted. Odell and Vervain were in the sunroom, voices low but sharp. I stepped in through the side door that always stuck slightly. It creaked like it always had, but no one noticed. Their conversation drifted to me before I was even halfway across the hall. "We just need Lyle to sign the amendment," Odell was saying, her voice businesslike, emotionless. "The trust needs to exclude her before this goes public. The optics will be bad enough without her name tied to the family account." Varaine's reply was calm, even casual. "The sooner we erase her from the legacy, the cleaner it'll be. I've already started the paperwork." I stopped in my tracks. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I didn't make a sound, just listened. "She doesn't have kids," Odell continued. "There's no binding tie. We can make this look like a mutual split. Keep it civil, controlled." My throat tightened, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of tears. So that's what I was now, a name to be erased from a spreadsheet. A loose end. I backed away as quietly as I could, slipping out the way I came in. I didn't rush. I didn't run. I walked slowly to my car, got in, and shut the door. Inside, I sat still for several minutes. The engine off, the world muted around me. They were already preparing for my absence. Not just emotionally, legally. That night, after dinner, I found myself parked outside the house again. Not mine, ours. Or what used to be ours. The porch light was on. I didn't go inside. Instead, I played a voicemail Al had left me years ago, back when he still made me feel like I was his first thought, not an obligation. His voice was younger then, warmer. "I chose you because you see the world slower kinder than I ever could. You balance me out." I sat there, listening to that line again, and again, until it didn't sound like a compliment anymore, until it sounded like a confession. I opened my own voice recorder, pressed record. "You chose me," I said quietly, "because you thought I wouldn't see it coming, because you assumed I'd stay quiet. But I did see it. I see it now, and I won't stay quiet." I saved the file, labeled it simply, response. Back inside, I poured a glass of wine, not to numb anything, but to mark something. A shift. I sat at the table, turned on my laptop, and opened the group chat one last time. The smiling faces at the vineyard stared back at me. I hit leave group, without hesitation. Then I opened a new message, and typed a single line to Lyle. "When this all falls apart, remember I warned you, quietly." I didn't wait for a reply. Instead, I closed the computer, finished my wine, and stood up. The air in the house felt still, like the moments before a storm. But it didn't scare me anymore. It steadied me. You all wanted a clean break. I'll make sure it's clean. The next morning started with a knock on my front door, not loud, but steady, purposeful. I was still in my robe, standing barefoot in the kitchen, pouring water into the kettle when I heard it. The sound felt out of place, cutting through the stillness of a house too quiet for how full my mind was. I set the kettle down and made my way toward the door. The delivery man stood there, clipboard in hand, a bright floral arrangement tucked under one arm. He smiled politely. "Delivery for Maylise," he said, double-checking the address. "Suite 2A. Is this?" My stomach clenched. "This is 2A," I answered, already knowing what this was. I didn't flinch. I reached out and took the bouquet, my eyes grazing over the small white card attached. "To New Beginnings. M." He handed me a pen to sign. I scribbled something that looked like my name and closed the door gently behind me. The scent of lilies and roses filled the entryway as I carried the arrangement to the kitchen. I placed it on the counter, right in the center, where the light from the window hit it just so. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just stared at the flowers as if they might explain something. A mistaken delivery, sure, but not an intention. I walked to the living room and sat down slowly, legs tucked under me, my fingers resting in my lap. The card rested between them, small and fragile. Just 6 words, but they said everything. So this was it. They had a language now, he and Maylise. A shared tone, shared timing, even shared florists. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't felt like a final slap to the face. I spent the rest of the morning going through my files. The screenshots, the transactions, the calendar syncs. I laid them out like puzzle pieces, making sure every detail fit. Every lie matched with a date. Every conference call that had coincided with a dinner for 2. Every vague excuse that now had a receipt behind it. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, a notification from an old email address that Lyle and I had both used for shared accounts. We hadn't accessed it in months, not since switching everything to the new system. At first, I thought it was spam, but curiosity won. I opened it. It was a forwarded voicemail, one that had accidentally been sent from the backup. A soft voice came through the speaker. "Mom, I saw Uncle Lyle kissing that woman again at the pool. Is he getting divorced?" The voice was unmistakable, Bryony, his daughter from his first marriage. The message ended with nothing more than silence. I sat frozen, the phone still in my hand, the sound of that child's voice echoing in my ears. Not anger, not even surprise, just a deep, cold grief that wrapped itself around my ribs. Even the children could see what he was trying to hide. Even they knew. I replayed it twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because something in me wanted to feel every inch of that truth. Later that day, I took the flowers from the counter and placed them on the dining room table. No note, no explanation, just the bouquet, now slightly wilted, the water untouched. By the time Lyle walked in around 6:30 p.m., I was already seated at the table, a glass of wine in front of me, a calm expression on my face. He glanced at the arrangement and paused. "What's this?" I tilted my head, voice light. "A gift, apparently sent to the wrong address." He blinked, caught off guard. "From who?" I took a sip of wine. "Your strategic partner. Thought you might want to follow up with her about that. Or maybe the delivery guy just knows something you don't." He started to say something, but I cut him off. "Don't." His mouth opened again, defensive. This is being blown out of proportion. You're making assumptions based on..." I set the glass down. "Don't insult me." He straightened his shoulders. "Nothing's going on. You're just emotional. You're reacting before you have all the facts." I smiled then. The kind of smile that holds no joy, only certainty. "Lyle, I have all the facts. I have receipts, bank charges, calendar entries. Even Bryony knows more than you think she does." He froze. His face changed. I had finally said a name he couldn't gaslight me out of. "You're going through my stuff now?" he asked, trying to shift the focus. "I'm building a record," I said. "A record of every choice you made. Not just the cheating, the lying, the erasing." He scoffed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You always were dramatic." I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice level. "And you always assumed I wouldn't notice." He stepped back from the table. "Look, if this is some kind of attack..." "It's not an attack. It's a boundary," I said. "If this is your new beginning, don't use my home as the launch pad." We stared at each other in silence. He didn't move. Neither did I. Then he turned and walked into the other room. No apology. No denial. Just silence. Later that night, after he had gone upstairs and I heard the bedroom door click shut, I gathered everything I had printed. I placed each page into a red folder, bright, bold, impossible to miss. On the cover, I wrote in clean black ink. Proof, for when they say it was all in my head. I placed the folder in the fireproof box in my closet, not because I wanted to burn anything, but because I planned to protect the truth. Then I sat back down at the table, the empty vase still sitting in the center, petals beginning to droop. And I said aloud, to no one in particular, "Next time you lie, I'll make sure the delivery guy doesn't drop the truth at my door." That night, after placing the red folder in the safe in my closet, I washed my face, brushed my teeth, and stared into the mirror longer than usual. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me, not because she looked different, but because she felt different. There was a stillness in my chest, not empty, not heavy, just composed. I didn't need anyone to hand me power. I already had it. It had always been mine. I had simply spent too long handing it over to people who didn't know what to do with it. The next morning came without ceremony. Birds chirped outside the window like they had no idea what was brewing inside this house. I was standing at the kitchen sink, drying a plate, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I almost didn't check it, but when I did, I saw Naira's name, followed by 3 words that instantly sank into my skin. "Did you know?" My heart stumbled. I called her. She picked up immediately. "Hey," she said, breathless. "Did you give Lyle permission to send that video?" "What video?" I asked, although I already knew. Something in my stomach coiled. There was a pause on her end. Then she said, carefully, the one from your first anniversary, the video you made for him. It's floating around. Someone forwarded it to a group chat. Lal's name is all over it. I thought maybe it was fake, some deepfake nonsense, but it's you, Emery. It's real. My mouth went dry. I leaned against the sink. He shared that. She hesitated. He told people it was a joke. Said you used to be into that stuff. Said it was mutual. But the way it's being passed around, it's not right. It's humiliating. And it's cruel. I closed my eyes, the room tilting slightly under my feet. That video was private, I said slowly. It was never supposed to leave his phone. I figured, Naira replied, her voice low. I'm sorry. I thought you should know. Thank you, I whispered, then ended the call before my voice cracked. I stood in the silence for a moment. Then I set the plate down, wiped my hands, and went upstairs. My laptop was already open on the bed. I sat down, opened the shared cloud account, and searched for the backup folder Lyle never bothered to secure. There it was, time-stamped, dated, the download request, the share link, the recipient email addresses. At 2:13 a.m., he had uploaded the video and sent it to at least 3 colleagues. The subject line read, "Back when she was fun." The rage that filled me didn't scream. It didn't explode. It sharpened. Later that day, when Lyle came home, I was ready. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door like nothing had happened. Walked into the kitchen like we hadn't crossed every line. "Hey," he said, pulling open the fridge. "You eat yet?" I waited until he closed the door, until he turned and saw me standing there, red folder in hand. "Did you enjoy the laughs?" I asked. He blinked, confused. "What?" "The video, Lyle. The one you shared. The one you edited and sent to your friends." His expression shifted, subtle at first. A quick twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, come on, Em. That was ages ago. You used to be into that stuff." "That stuff," I repeated, voice steady. "You mean my body, my trust, my consent." He scoffed. "Don't get all dramatic. It was just between friends. Harmless." "No, Lyle. What's harmless is a joke. What you did was weaponize me for entertainment." "You're overreacting," he said, reaching for his glass. "You always do this. Blow things up." I stepped forward. "You don't get to rewrite what consent looks like just because you've rewritten our marriage." His jaw tightened. "You've changed, Emery. You're paranoid. You need help." And there it was, the line they all reach for when they're cornered. "Let me guess," I said. "You're going to tell people I'm unstable now? Unhinged? That I imagined everything?" He shrugged. "I've had to make excuses, Emery. You've been erratic." "Right," I said, stepping aside. "Then let's ask your mother. She's on that video call right now, isn't she?" He paused, then narrowed his eyes. "What are you doing?" I gestured toward the den. "Come on. Let's talk in front of the family." We walked in. Odell's face was already on the screen mid-sentence. Verrain too. They went quiet when they saw me. "Good evening," I said calmly, walking to the table. "I believe Lal has something to explain." Lal gave a tight smile. "This isn't the time, Em." I opened the red folder. Took out a printed page. "This is a screenshot of a video that Lyle shared without my consent. Here's the metadata. The timestamp. The email it was sent to." I laid it on the table. Then another. "Here's the receipt from the resort in Asheville. The dinner. The spa. The card he used." Verrain looked away. Odell's lips pressed into a thin line. "He claims I'm paranoid," I said, voice unwavering. "He says I'm unstable. But this," I tapped the papers, "is reality." Lal scoffed. "Are you seriously airing this out in front of my family?" "No," I said, stepping back. "I'm documenting it. In front of your witnesses." Odell opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, there were no tidy words, no defense. I turned to leave. As I reached the hallway, I heard Lal call after me. "You're crazy, Emery." I stopped, turned slightly, and said just loud enough, "If you think I'm crazy now, wait until you see what I stream next." I went up the stairs, calm and even. Each step felt lighter. I didn't slam the door. I didn't break down. I didn't scream. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, and pulled up a new folder. Draft, public statement. Under it, a new file. Title, How Silence Became My Greatest Weapon. I typed one sentence before I closed the screen. I'm done being silent. Next stop, prime time. After shutting my laptop, I sat still for a moment in the dim light of my bedroom. The clock read 9:47 p.m., but my mind was already sprinting toward the next move. I didn't feel brave, or angry, or vindicated. I felt organized. The kind of clarity that shows up after you've stopped begging for answers. I stood, pulled a cardigan over my shoulders, and walked down to the kitchen. I boiled water, poured tea, and while the mug warmed my hands, I stared at the living room television. That big, flat screen had once been where Lyle and I curled up on Sundays, watching documentaries we never finished. Now it was going to become something else entirely. I opened the drawer where we kept old Tech, pulled out his smartwatch. He hadn't used it in months, preferred something newer now, but he hadn't deactivated it either. That was his mistake. I powered it on, synced it to our old family media network, still connected to Odell's smart TV. A leftover setting from last Thanksgiving, when we'd streamed family photos at the dinner table and everyone pretended not to notice how little Lyle and I smiled in the pictures. It took 10 minutes to sync everything. The device blinked, connected. I then set up the stream. Trigger activation when GPS located him at the Marquette Hotel. The app would start recording video and sound from the smartwatch and project it directly to the connected device, Odell's television. I double-checked the time. Sunday dinner. They always gathered at 6:30 p.m. sharp. Dress code, wine, soft jazz, and layers of passive-aggressive silence. Perfect. I didn't sleep well that night. The anticipation of what I had planned buzzed louder than the wind against the windows. By morning, I was running through checklists in my mind. Tech, timing, control. Sunday evening arrived like any other. I drove past Odell's house just before 6:15, parked a block away, watched through the windshield. Cars already lined the drive. Inside, they were likely on their second round of wine. Verraine would be holding court, talking about her latest boardroom triumph. Maylise would be there too. Of course she would. They had stopped hiding her presence weeks ago. And Lyle, I knew exactly where he was. The GPS pinged. The app confirmed. Smartwatch had entered the suite level at the Marquette. I opened the controller on my phone. Activate stream. Across town, inside that picture-perfect dining room, their TV flickered to life. I imagined the clinking of glasses stopping. Odell reaching for the remote in confusion. Then the screen stabilizing. The image was clear. The camera, positioned at an upward angle from Lyle's wrist, showed the plush interior of a hotel suite. Dim lights, champagne on the table. Maylise walked into frame, laughing barefoot, a towel wrapped around her. Lyle followed, grinning, shirt half-buttoned. He leaned in to whisper something into her ear. She giggled. Then he kissed her neck. No audio was needed to understand. The stream continued for another 30 seconds, just enough to remove doubt. Then it cut to black. I waited. 2 minutes later, my phone lit up. Odell. Then Verraine. Then Lyle. I ignored them all. Instead, I drove. Calm, steady, no music. Just the sound of tires against asphalt and my thoughts, no longer screaming, just humming with focus. When I arrived at Odell's house, the front door was slightly ajar. I knocked anyway, then stepped inside. The dining room was frozen. No one touched their glasses. Verraine's face was pale. Odell stood stiff near the TV, arms crossed, the remote dangling from her hand. Lyle wasn't there. I took a deep breath, then walked in. I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence breathe. Now you know, I finally said, my voice even. All of it. Odell's mouth opened, but no words came. I didn't wait. I turned and walked out, my heels quiet against their polished floor. By the time I reached the car, my hands weren't shaking. Back home, I sat at my desk and picked up my phone again. There was one more thing to do. I opened the voice recorder and began a message. Not to Lyle. Not to Odell. To Bryony. I didn't say much. Didn't detail every lie, every cut. She was too young for that. But I said what mattered. You may not know everything, and you shouldn't have to. But you deserve to hear the truth from someone who's not trying to manipulate you. Your father made a lot of choices. I hope yours will be different. I paused before ending the recording, then hit send. I stared at the screen for a moment, watching it disappear into the cloud. No takebacks. No edits. Afterward, I stepped into the hallway and looked at the framed photo of the family hung near the staircase. I took it down, opened the back, removed my own image, just the little printed square of me smiling in the corner. I left the rest. When I walked out the front door, I didn't slam it, didn't storm off. Just before the door closed behind me, I whispered one more thing. You protected a lie. I just pressed play. By the time I stepped into the house the next morning, the air felt noticeably heavier. Not because of anything said. No one had said a word, but because of everything that now couldn't be unsaid. The dinner fallout had traveled fast. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive message in the family chat. And I knew that silence wasn't absence, it was calculation. They were regrouping, retooling the narrative, figuring out how to make it seem like I had ambushed them. But I didn't care. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and read the morning headlines on my phone like nothing had happened. No front-page scandal yet, but I knew the Monroe name would be whispered about in offices, whispered behind closed doors in those fancy clubs they liked to frequent. Odell had always cared more about reputation than reality. I figured she'd be the first to try and pretend it never happened. Denial was her spiritual discipline. Around noon, I got a ping from my bank account. One of the business cards, previously under Lyle and my name, had been removed. Varaine's name replaced mine. A few minutes later, another notification. I had been removed as an administrator from the Foundation's digital portal. That was how they did things. Quietly, bureaucratically, like erasure was just an update to a settings page. I smiled. Then I poured the coffee down the sink and walked upstairs to finish packing. The guest room closet had 2 bags I hadn't touched in over a year. One was empty. The other still had my mother's shawl folded at the bottom. I took it out, pressed it to my chest, then laid it on the bed. When I was 10, my mother told me something that didn't make sense at the time but lived in the back of my brain like a whisper. You don't have to win every argument, she'd said, tying her apron. You just have to walk away with your name intact. I hadn't thought about that line in years. But it came to me now, steady and warm, like she was sitting across from me, arms folded, watching me gather my things. I opened my phone and found the last voicemail she ever left me. I'd saved it, backed it up, downloaded it twice. Hi, honey, her voice crackled slightly. Just wanted to hear your voice. Call when you can. Love you. I didn't cry, but my shoulders dropped just a little, like she'd lifted the weight off them for a second. You were right, Mom, I said softly, folding the shawl into the suitcase. You were always right. That afternoon, I called a driver to pick me up at the estate gate. I didn't want Lyle's car, and I wasn't interested in anyone seeing me drive away with a trunk full of baggage, literal or otherwise. As I zipped up my suitcase and turned off the bedroom light for the last time, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. I figured someone had finally come to confront me, or maybe try one last half-hearted attempt at saving face. But it wasn't Lyle, and it wasn't Odell. It was Ramona. She stood there in her usual press shirt, hands folded in front of her like she was afraid to cross a line. I saw what they did, she said quietly. All of it. I nodded. I know. Ramona reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My fingers recognized it before my eyes did. It was the silver hair clip I'd worn at the wedding, the one I'd thought I'd lost on our honeymoon. They don't know the difference between right and convenient, she said, pressing it into my hand. But you do. I opened the box and stared at the clip. It still had a strand of hair caught in it. My hair, from a different version of me. Thank you, I whispered, for everything. She touched my arm gently. Walk proud, Miss Emery. You've earned it. I walked through the house one last time, but not to linger. I didn't look back at the dining room or the photo wall, or the heavy furniture that always made me feel small. Out front, the car waited. The driver stepped out and took my suitcase. Before getting in, I took one last breath. The kind that clears space in your chest. The kind that says, I'm not carrying this anymore. I turned to face the house, not as someone being cast out, but as someone choosing to leave. Some endings don't need an audience. Just a door that finally closes. The hum of tires against asphalt was the only sound in the car as we pulled away from the Monroe estate for the last time. I didn't glance back. Not once. Not at the columns I used to clean holiday wreaths from, not at the porch I used to sweep while they all gathered inside without me. By the time the driver dropped me off at the small duplex on a quiet street in Asheville, the sun had started its slow descent, casting a soft golden hue over the sidewalks. The house was modest. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, creaky floors, and an old heater that groaned to life every time I turned the dial. But it was mine. Inside, a few moving boxes remained in the corner. Most were unpacked. I'd arranged the living room just how I liked it. Simple, soft lighting, no trace of anyone else's taste but my own. There was a tiny garden in the backyard, and every morning since I moved in, I watered the basil and marigolds while humming to myself. No one watched. No one judged. It was the kind of peace I hadn't known I missed. Work came in small but fulfilling doses. I'd started part-time with a local hospice organization, coordinating volunteer schedules, sitting with patients who had no family. The first week, I wasn't sure if I could handle it. But I did, and it reminded me that even in endings, there's dignity. There's still time for kindness. It had been 3 weeks since the dinner, since the stream, since I'd walked out without asking permission. The Monroe name had surfaced once in the Business Digest. Monroe Group reviewing internal conduct amid allegations of misconduct. The article didn't name names, but everyone who needed to know already did. Lyle was on leave. Mailings had disappeared from every professional site I could find. LinkedIn scrubbed, company bios deleted. Odell, silent. Even Verraine, who always found a way to insert herself, hadn't dared to send me a single message. And I wasn't waiting for one. Most evenings now, I sat on the back porch with a glass of tea, a blanket around my legs, and a journal in my lap. It wasn't dramatic, just thoughts, quiet and true. One night, I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "You don't need to burn down the house. Sometimes you just need to walk out and let them live in what they built." That sentence stayed with me, like a mantra, like a mirror. I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want anyone to beg for forgiveness. I just wanted to live my life without apologizing for being the one who finally stopped pretending. One afternoon, I went out to pick up groceries and found myself walking down a street I hadn't planned on visiting. Downtown Asheville had a small independent bookstore, one of those warm places with creaky floors and handwritten staff recommendations taped to every shelf. As I passed the front window, something caught my eye. A display of memoirs, blurbs about resilience, survival, truth. And there, in the center, was a paperback titled, "The Truth Always Streams." There was no author photo, just a pen name. I stood there, staring at it, and couldn't help the faint smile that tugged at my lips. I didn't know who had written it, but I knew the truth in that title. The truth to stream. You don't always have to shout it. Sometimes, you just press play. I walked past the window, down the block, toward the corner cafe that had become my Sunday ritual. I ordered the usual, black coffee, light honey, sat by the window and pulled out my notebook. There were scars. Of course there were. But they didn't ache the way they used to. They were part of me now. Quiet reminders. I flipped through the pages, rereading bits of old entries, all the way back to one that started with, "He told me not to call." And I remembered. The message. The tone. The way it made me shrink. So I wrote one final note, folded it neatly, placed it in an envelope. No return address. Just 6 words on the front. To the man who told me not to call. Inside I wrote, "I didn't call you. I called the world. They answered. And now you finally know how loud silence can be." I dropped it in a mailbox on the walk home. Not because I needed him to read it, but because I needed to send it. I didn't check to see if it arrived. That part wasn't mine to control. What was mine was everything that came next. He said he'd be busy for a week. Turns out, I was just getting started. Sometimes, silence is not weakness. It's the calm before a woman decides to burn the truth into everyone's memory. Emery didn't scream, didn't fight for permission to be respected. She simply let the facts speak. And when the world saw what was hidden, no one could unsee it. So let me ask you, if it were you, would you stay quiet? Or would you press play? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories that hit deep, stir emotions, and remind us